When did karma hit so perfectly in a relationship you still think about it today? Story 1. I dated my boss for 8 months because I was naive enough to think no one at work needs to know. Evan was the kind who organized birthday cupcakes and remembered your dog's name, which is exactly the type who can lie without blinking. When a client file vanished from our shared drive, he called an emergency meeting and implied I'd mismanaged access. My stomach dropped. If data goes missing in compliance, your career is toast. HR launched an informal review, which meant whispers I could feel on the elevator. I didn't sleep that week. I replayed every keystroke in my head. On Friday, our company did the annual cybersecurity training where IT shows phishing stats and login anomalies to scare everyone straight. The new CISO, dry as toast, clicked to a slide labeled Odd Hours Access. Up popped a heat map with logins by time and IP. A tiny dot pulsed at 2:17 a.m. from a downtown boutique hotel. The username on the screen, Evan.p. The room laughed nervously until the CISO said, "Also, this user accessed and deleted the client folder from the hotel Wi-Fi. We restored it, but please don't do work from unsecured networks or hotel rooms." He clicked again and the metadata enlarged. Same MAC address, same timestamp as the deletion, and, because God has a sense of humor, the hotel name was visible in the SSID. Evan went sheet white. HR stood up. Our COO, who hates drama, said, "Let's take a quick break." 5 minutes later, security escorted Evan out of the ballroom past the cupcake tower. HR's rep, the one who had been comforting him during my review, followed, red-eyed and silent. By Monday, the company email announced, "After an internal investigation, we have parted ways with Evan for cause. The informal review on me closed," with a written apology. The client sent a fruit basket because the restored file proved we'd actually exceeded requirements. I got a raise, and ironically, Evan's abandoned office. Here's the part that felt like karma aiming with a laser. The boutique hotel sent an itemized receipt to our accounts payable because Evan had stuck the room on his corporate card. Under additional services was a charge for romance package, 2 a.m. delivery. The AP clerk and gossip queen snorted and forwarded it to HR. In the end, his own overnight affair and his eagerness to frame me provided the paper trail that cleared my name. I still think about how perfectly the evidence lined up, down to the Wi-Fi name glowing on a projector. Story 2. I'm 19 now, but when I was 15, I sat in a courtroom waiting to tell a judge which parent I wanted to live with. My mom had been telling people my dad walked out when I was 8. She'd collect my birthday packages from the porch and say, "He forgot again." I grew up angry at him and loyal to her. Loyalty is a funny word when you're a kid. It feels like love until it feels like a leash. Dad never fought back in front of me. He kept showing up at soccer games and standing by the fence in a stupid work polo. I wouldn't look at him. The night before the hearing, I found an old phone in a junk drawer, mine from middle school with a cracked screen. There were voice memos I'd recorded to practice speeches for class. One was labeled practice. I pressed play and heard my mom coaching me. "If they ask, say you felt unsafe at Dad's. Mention the late pickup. Cry if you can. Judges are soft." My hands shook so hard I dropped the phone. I didn't sleep. In court, my mom whispered, "Remember, unsafe." When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I asked if I could play a recording. He raised an eyebrow, but I handed the clerk the phone. My mom's voice filled the room, coaching me to lie. Silence is heavy when grown-ups run out of scripts. The judge asked my mom if that was her. She started blaming stress. "You don't know what he put me through." And then the mail carrier, yes, the actual mail carrier, stood up from the back. Dad had subpoenaed him. He testified that for years my mom told him to mark packages refused and to leave certified letters from my dad undelivered because the recipient moved. Dad didn't smile. He just stared at the table like if he lifted his eyes everything would explode. The judge changed custody on the spot, admonished the coaching, and ordered therapy. Mom stormed out saying I'd chosen money over love. I cried in the hallway, not because of custody, but because the word love suddenly felt like a trap that snapped shut and released when truth pried it open. Karma wasn't thunder. It was paperwork and patience. The shoebox of letters Dad brought, each stamped refused in my mom's handwriting, outweighed every story she told. The judge later told me kids usually know. I think about it every time I open a package. Someone tried to keep love out of the house and it still found a way in. Story 3. I was the bridesmaid who kept her mouth shut for 6 months because the bride begged me to. She said, "If you're wrong, I'll destroy my own wedding." Nate, the groom, had business trips that suspiciously overlapped with his trainer's check-ins on Instagram stories. The trainer never tagged him, but she'd post a view from the same hotel rooftop, Same sundown. I collected screenshots like a raccoon collects shiny things. We tried subtle. The bride asked to see receipts. Nate called her paranoid and waved a spreadsheet. His mom cornered me at the rehearsal and said I was jealous of real commitment. So at the reception, when the best man emceed a slideshow of childhood photos, I felt sick. The first 3 slides were harmless. Baby Nate in a sink, braces, prom. Then came the fun with travel section. We hadn't told the best man. We told the DJ. The 4th slide looked like a city skyline. The DJ overlaid audio. Welcome to Denver. Then the picture zoomed, and it wasn't a skyline. It was a Ring doorbell clip of Nate at 2 a.m., kissing the trainer on her stoop. Date stamp visible. The room gasped. Nate lunged toward the tech table, but the DJ had already cued the next. A hotel receipt from a wellness package, charged to Nate's card the same night he told the bride his flight was delayed. His mother stood, trembling with rage, and yelled, "This is a deep fake." That's when a man in a polo at the back, our HOA president of all people, raised his hand and said, "That's my citation in his hand. I left it on that porch for trash can violations. The date's mine." You could feel the floor tilt. The bride didn't scream. She walked to Nate, took off her veil, and put it in his mother's hands. Then she turned to the venue manager and said, "We need the contract." Months earlier, Nate had insisted on paying everything by himself as a gift. The contract, his pride, listed him as sole responsible party for all costs and damages. She signed a single line to cancel the rest of the night. Karma didn't strike like lightning. It was scheduled. The DJ hit stop, the room went quiet, and the slideshow froze on a photo of Nate at 6, missing his front teeth. He looked small again, except the bill was very adult. The bride walked out under a canopy of murmurs and the smell of burnt appetizers, and somehow the night felt saved for everyone but the man who thought he could expense deceit. Story 4. When my ex left, he took the wedding fund he'd been managing and left me a note about freedom. I counted the cash I still had. $118. I also had a folder, the unsexy kind of folder that lives at the bottom of a drawer, full of screenshots, Venmo descriptions, Zelle memos, a text where he wrote, "Switching savings to my account for interest LOL," and my favorite, a selfie of him holding a new watch with the caption, "Investing in myself." He started posting TikToks about flipping cars. He filmed in my driveway while I was at work, because the lease was in my name, and he never bothered to change the garage code. "Rise and grind," he'd say, leaning against a salvage Audi. In one video, he bragged about keeping it all cash so the IRS can't touch me, which is a wild thing to say on an app that saves drafts to the cloud. 2 months later, a thick envelope arrived addressed to both of us. CP 2000. Proposed changes. He'd listed our joint address on a $1,099 from a side auction. I learned a new phrase, innocent spouse relief. I sent the IRS a neat packet with copies of his own videos, the watch selfie, and the memo where he borrowed the wedding fund for crypto buy promise will replace. While that simmered, he messaged me asking to come home and talk. He'd been evicted from his new place after filming a burnout in the parking lot. I kept my response lawyer clean. Communicate through counsel. He called me cold. Karma doesn't care about temperature. It cares about receipts. 3 months later, the audit hit him like a bus. They used his reels to reconstruct income. He owed 5 figures plus penalties. He called me furious that I'd snitched, which is fascinating because the person who actually snitched was his algorithm. My relief application was approved. I got a letter that read like rain on dry ground. Here's the part I replay. I was eating pancakes alone at the kitchen island. The one he said was too small for a real family. When my phone suggested a video, you might know this creator. It was him, sweaty, filming himself in the garage as movers took his boxes. The caption said, "You learn who's loyal when you're down." In the background, you can hear my neighbor's wind chimes and, faintly, me laughing at a joke on a podcast. I didn't mean to laugh then. But sometimes the universe syncs the soundtrack. The refund covered my first semester of a master's program. He DM'd me last week to ask if I'd co-sign a new car. I didn't reply. No can be a silent, perfect form of karma too. Story 5. I was the other woman who didn't know I was the other anything. Tom said he'd been divorced for a year. He introduced me to a circle of friends, brought me to his mom's Sunday dinners, and left a toothbrush at my place with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for exchanging vows. His mom hugged me like she'd been waiting for me. I should have noticed the hug was also an apology she hadn't said yet. One afternoon, I got a DM from a stranger. "Do you know Tom is my fiancé?" I thought it was a prank, until she attached a photo of the same toothbrush at her sink. He'd literally bought 2 of the same brand to keep the stage set perfect in 2 apartments. We compared calendars. He had copy-pasted the same Good morning beautiful to us for 46 straight days. The audacity was industrial grade. I didn't want to play chess with a liar. I wanted a clean board. I told her I'd go with whatever she wanted to do. She said, "His mother loves you. Let's tell her together." So we went to Sunday dinner. The table was set with too many forks. Tom showed up late, explained it away with traffic, kissed my head, then kissed hers on the cheek like we were sitcom characters in a farce. His mom came out with a casserole and froze, reading the room. The fiancé put the toothbrush on the table like evidence at a trial. I put down a printed Google Calendar color-coded work, me, her. Even the dog looked guilty. Tom did the whole head and hands routine. I was going to tell you. His mother sat down slowly and said, "Your father did this to me twice." Then she looked at us and said, "I gave my son the benefit of the doubt because I didn't want to believe I raised a man who thinks women are furniture." She turned to Tom. "You don't get dessert, and you don't get access." Karma wasn't the reveal. It was the consequences that kept happening. His mom called her lawyer the next day and removed him as a signatory on the family business account. She texted both of us separately to ask if we were safe and if we needed help moving. We ended up moving each other. We boxed up his things, labeled them with the efficiency of grief. Shirts, tools, trust. On my last trip down the stairs, his mom met me at the door. She handed me an envelope with a photo from the first dinner I'd attended. Me laughing, her listening, and a note. "You're not a mistake just because a man made one." I still think about that line when my brain tries to replay the worst parts. Tom keeps texting from new numbers. I block, she blocks, the dog is doing fine. The toothbrushes went in the trash. The casserole recipe stayed. Sometimes karma is a mother drawing a boundary so clean you can eat off it. Story 6. Marco used to joke that his mother's house would be our starter flip. He'd say it at Sunday dinners, loud enough for her to hear, then wink at me like I was in on the bit. I wasn't. When his mom's cancer came back, I moved into the guest room and learned the schedule of pills, the way to cool tea until it didn't burn, the hum of the oxygen concentrator. Marco learned market comps. He kept texting realtors. After the funeral, the lawyer gathered us in the living room that smelled like eucalyptus and soup. Marco crossed his legs like a man about to accept an award. The will was short. She left small bequests, a jewelry box to a niece, her books to the library, then to Elena, me, the house. Marco laughed out loud, like someone had told a bad joke at a wake. The lawyer kept reading. "If there is any dispute, listen." He set a small speaker on the coffee table and hit play. It was her voice, soft but clear. "If you're hearing this, I'm not here to argue." I heard my son call me a liability when he thought I was asleep. I heard him say Elena was useful now, but not forever. I thought usefulness is what we call love when it's tired. "Elena, you never sounded tired of me." Then another audio clip, tinny and unmistakable. Marco on a baby monitor, whispering to a realtor about how much cash the old lady's place would throw off. The room went still in that hard way grief turns to something sharper. Marco's aunt put her hand on his knee and moved it away like she'd touched a stove. The lawyer slid over an envelope with the deed. Already recorded, my name alone. Marco sputtered about intent, threatened to contest, and then his mother's neighbor, who had watched me carry a frail woman into sunlight, said, "She changed the will after she overheard you. You told me the market was hot." I slept in the master bedroom the first night with the door open, listening for a machine that wasn't there. The next morning, Marco texted, "We should talk. We can still sell and split. Be reasonable." I brewed tea and looked at the keys I'd set in a little blue bowl. They felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Karma didn't come to me at a courthouse or on a projector. It arrived as a mother choosing who loved her, and a house that finally felt like a home because the person who wanted to flip it was the one who had to leave. Story 7. Danny used to tell our friends I was baby crazy. He said it with a smile so they'd think it was playful. We tried for 2 years. Every month I bought cheap tests in bulk and learned to hate 2 minutes. He suggested supplements, yoga, less coffee, more sunlight. I tracked my cycle until my body felt like a project plan. After one gynecologist appointment, he squeezed my hand and said, "We'll keep trying." He never once booked a semen analysis. I found the truth by accident. A pharmacy bag fell out of his gym duffel. Clomiphene, anastrozole, injectable testosterone. A cocktail you don't exactly take for family planning. I Googled, then sat on the edge of the tub while the mirror fogged. He came home to me holding the leaflet. He said it was for energy and temporary. I said, "You don't need energy to make a baby. You need honesty." He confessed in pieces how he'd had a vasectomy at 24 before we met, because kids weren't in the plan. How he'd told himself he'd reverse it, if it felt right. How the idea of being a dad made his throat close. He kept saying he meant to tell me. He kept not telling me. I packed a bag and stayed with my sister, who put tea in my hands and didn't ask questions for 3 days. We divorced quietly. He moved in with a woman from his gym who also wanted kids, Like yesterday. 6 months later, I got a long broken text. The reversal failed. The surgeon says there's scarring. I'm so sorry he didn't ask to come back. He asked if I still hated him. I didn't. Hate is active. I was tired. I started the foster to adopt classes I'd bookmarked and then avoided because it hurt. On the day I got approval, I ran into him at the grocery store. He looked smaller, like someone erased the part of him that thought time was elastic. We made small talk by the blueberries. I told him I was hoping for a placement soon. His eyes filled. He said he had dreamed of a daughter with my laugh and then swallowed his own sentence like it burned. I could have said something cruel. Instead, I said, I hope you get the life you can live with. A year later, I took my daughter to the park. She climbed the low ladder and looked back to make sure I was still there. And when she reached the top, she laughed. Big, ridiculous, a sound you can stand inside. Sometimes karma looks like punishment, but this felt different. It felt like truth choosing sides. The man who insisted I was the problem discovered the problem had his name on it, and the family I wanted arrived anyway. Story 8. When we split, Trevor took Luna for the weekend to help me adjust. He didn't return her. He said I was neglectful because I worked late. He posted a photo of her in his lap with the caption, "Men take care too," which men in the comments applauded like he'd invented a leash. I texted, called, emailed. He blocked me. My apartment was suddenly too quiet in the dumb way heartbreak is loud. I filed in small claims for possession. People warned me judges don't spend time on dogs, but our judge had a Snoopy mug and eyes that said she'd heard every lie. Trevor brought a binder he'd made at a print shop, full of photos of him and Luna at breweries and farmers markets. He said the dog chose him. I brought microchip registration, vet records, obedience class receipts, and, because the internet never forgets, a screenshot of a Craigslist ad he'd posted 3 days after taking her. Rehoming female husky. No time. The ad had my couch in the background. He said it was fake. The judge asked how my couch got into a fake ad. He said deep fake, like it was a spell. The bailiff coughed into his fist in a way that sounded like a laugh. Then the judge did something small that felt holy. Where is the dog? Trevor had left Luna in his sister's car. The bailiff fetched her. When she burst into the courtroom, she made a pinball line for me, throwing her entire ridiculous body into my knees, making that husky yodel that sounds like a ghost singing. The judge didn't smile, but her eyes did. I see. She awarded possession to me effective immediately and ordered Trevor to pay the filing fee and 1 month of food costs because he'd withheld her without legal basis. He sulked like a little boy who'd been told bedtime was real. Outside, in the corridor with bad art, he hissed that I'd embarrassed him. Luna sneezed at his shoes and sat on my foot like a seal on a rock. Karma wasn't cinematic. It was administrative. It was signatures and a stamp and a dog who knew her person. That night, Luna fell asleep across my feet, and I cried into her fur until my face hurt. Every so often, a notification pops up for Time Hop with a picture of her in that courtroom corridor. Tongue lolling, oblivious to human pride. I save it every time. Pride is loud. Paperwork is louder. And a dog running toward you with her whole heart. Loudest of all. Story 9. I was the stepdad people politely underestimated. I met Maya at 7 when she had a gap-toothed smile and a habit of narrating her every move. Her dad, Eric, liked to show up big and disappear bigger. He'd arrive with drones and hoverboards and leave with, "Work is crazy." I learned to braid hair from a YouTube video and to keep Capri Suns in the glove compartment for after gymnastics. At her high school graduation, Eric brought a banner with her face and his last name in block letters, like a campaign ad. He handed out business cards for his new real estate venture under the bleachers. He put his arm around her for photos and whispered, "Remember who got you here," the way a man might whisper the end of a magic trick. The principal announced a new award. A local foundation had endowed a scholarship for resilience and excellence, and the recipient would read their application essay. Maya took the stage, gripping the paper like it might fly away. She thanked teachers. She thanked the librarian who kept the building open late. Then she started her essay. My first language was loyalty. It took me until middle school to learn fluency in love. She told a story I knew but had never heard from her mouth. The math meet, where Eric promised to come and texted at halftime. Flight delayed. The weekend he dropped her off with a woman whose name she didn't know and then went out of town. The night she laid out 2 plates just in case and learned that empty plates are heavy. Then she talked about the time I sat in a plastic chair at 2 a.m. in an ER, holding a puke bag and telling jokes so the IV didn't seem like a snake. He never asked me to prove I'm worth his time, she read. He just shows up and time follows. Eric got up, then sat down. He looked like a man deciding whether to storm a stage. The principal handed Maya an envelope. She smiled at us and said, "One more thing." She turned to the superintendent. "I filed a name change last month. It came through yesterday." She unzipped her gown and there, on the sash beneath, stitched clean, was my last name. The gym made a sound I can't describe, something between thunder and a hug. Eric walked out before the band struck up. I didn't chase him. I held my wife's shaking hand while our kid walked back to us with an envelope and a name she'd chosen like a future. Karma, for once, wasn't about losing something. It was about who got to keep showing up in every photo after. Story 10. Nikolai liked to remind me he'd saved me by filing my spousal sponsorship when I moved from student visa to permanent residency. He weaponized paperwork. If we argued about chores, he'd say, "Don't forget who can withdraw support." If I made a new friend, he'd say, "People will think you're using me." He didn't hit. He held things above my head. I learned the law the way some people learn recipes, one clause at a time. I met with a nonprofit attorney in a cramped office with a flickering fluorescent light and discovered a thing I didn't know existed. Routes to status that didn't require a husband's signature when there'd been abuse. Of finances, threats, control. I started keeping a journal with dates. I stopped telling him things he could dangle. The day my independent application was approved, I bought a cake with too much frosting and ate a piece at my kitchen table, alone, shaking like I'd jumped from a high place and landed. I didn't tell him. I didn't owe him a narrative arc. Months later, I flew to see my sister. At the airport, Nikolai's texts popped up even though I'd muted him. "Border's going to be a nightmare for you without me." He'd filed a tip saying I was committing marriage fraud. He told me so like it was foreplay for anxiety. At the gate, the agent scanned my passport and waved me through to TSA pre-check because, surprise, my government trusted me more than my ex did. On the way back, he was at arrivals waiting with that smile menus when they think they've built the maze. They'll pull you for secondary. I made sure we walked together toward customs because sometimes life writes bad sitcoms. An officer stepped forward. Not to me, to him. "Sir, we need to speak with you about a false report." The complaint had a callback number. He'd used his own cell. Of course he had. They took him to a small room with glass you could see into. I handed the officer my documents, approval notices, a neat folder because I still like paperwork, and she glanced at them, handed them back and said, "You're good." I walked past the room where he sat wringing his hands like a man caught in his own net. Karma wasn't a knockdown. It was a mirror. He finally got to experience what he'd promised me every time he said, "They can send you back." I still live here. I got a new job, a tiny balcony, a plant I keep not killing. When I passed my citizenship test, I celebrated with cake again. He texted, "Congrats," from a new number at 1 a.m. I blocked it with the calm of someone who owns her own narrative and her own passport. Story 11. I dated an influencer, the kind who says authentic so often it turns into a brand color. I also ran PR for the startup sponsoring his wholesome couple content. He made me sign an NDA he called standard, but it read like a muzzle. No defamatory statements, no private disputes, penalties tied to campaign revenue. When I found his alt TikTok, hotel mirrors, the same hat he left at my place, captions like soft launch, he shrugged. "You can't say anything. Morals clause cuts both ways." Launch day was a live stream. Stage lights, product towers, captions on screen to meet accessibility guidelines. He jabbed me in the ribs on his way up and whispered, "Don't stare. You look clingy." During a break, he leaned toward his co-host and, believing his lav was muted, murmured, "After this, I'm switching phones and dumping her. Can't have a rebrand with baggage." The captions dutifully typed his whisper, "Dumping her. Rebrand with baggage." 10,000 viewers saw it before the tech switched feeds. Comments erupted like popcorn. In Caption Gate trended in 20 minutes. He tried to play it off. Audio glitch. Our accessibility vendor posted a statement. No glitch, just speech to text. He spun, furious, and hissed that I'd set him up. But the live belonged to the brand, not him. Legal sent a tidy email. Morals clause terminated for cause. All fees clawed back, deliverables void. He begged for a statement to clear the air. The NDA he weaponized bit him. It barred him from discussing internal disputes with brand partners. If he talked, he'd owe more. If he stayed quiet, the captions spoke for him. He posted a black screen apology anyway. The brand's fans moved on. His didn't. The comment every algorithm kept pinning was from a deaf viewer. "Thanks for finally letting us in on the whispers." I still think about how perfect that was. The very captions he treated like a box to tick became the record he couldn't rewrite. Accessibility wasn't a checkbox. It was a mirror. And he accidentally told the truth to everyone who'd always been reading between the lines. Story 12. I'm a stepmom who promised not to replace anyone, just to show up. Maya's dad, Jordan, loved to threaten court like it was a weather forecast. He'd skip weekends, then email that I was alienating him because I scheduled orthodontist appointments without consulting the legal father. When we petitioned for me to adopt, Maya asked, not us. The hearing felt like a tightrope over a canyon. Jordan arrived in a new suit, swinging a briefcase he didn't need. He'd brought printouts of my Instagram, circling photos where I hugged her after track meets. Overstepping. He told the judge he feared erasure. The judge asked him when he last attended a parent-teacher conference. He said, I work. The judge nodded, the way a surgeon nods before cutting. Then the door opened and a bailiff murmured to the clerk. The clerk handed the judge a paper. The judge looked up at Jordan. Mr. R., there is an active bench warrant for your arrest in County B for failure to appear on child support arrears for your older son. Bailiff? Jordan laughed. Wrong choice. Until the cuffs clicked. He sputtered that this was unrelated. But in a room about responsibility, it felt painfully relevant. The judge took a breath. We'll proceed, she said, eyes soft on Maya. Adoption is about stability. Mr. R., your pattern speaks for itself. We testified. Dentist records, school pickups, the night Maya's appendix hurt, and we drove 40 minutes to an ER because she said, I want mom. Both moms. And didn't let go of my sleeve until the anesthesia took her. Jordan kept talking from the hallway, muffled through the door like a man in a dream arguing with rain. The judge signed. A court clerk handed Maya a teddy bear they keep for days like this. We walked into sunlight with a new birth certificate application, and the kind of tired that feels like relief wearing boots. I still think about the timing, not because I wanted him humiliated, but because consequence arrived exactly when his favorite threat did. For years, he promised court would fix me. Court fixed the story he kept telling. Who shows up and who only shows up to be seen. Story 13. Our church ran a couples ministry where the pastor's wife, Ruth, kept a spiral notebook of prayer requests like a ledger of hope. My ex, Aaron, loved that room. He'd squeeze my hand during testimonials and tilt his head like empathy was a camera angle. At home, he rationed affection like coupons and kept a streak of flirty DMs with women from Outreach, which he called evangelism of the heart. I called it cheating. He called me unspiritual. We broke up in private because I was tired of being pious and empty. He stayed in the ministry and started counseling a newlywed, sending her midnight scriptures with selfies angled just so. Her husband confronted him. Aaron turned it into a sermon illustration about false accusation. One Sunday, Ruth asked to share something delicate. She set her notebook down and opened a manila folder. Our social media manager noticed unusual activity, she said. The church Facebook inbox had screenshots. Aaron's messages, all sent from the church page after midnight when he thought he'd switched back to his personal account. You're so beautiful when you're struggling. Makes me want to hold you until the spirit moves, read one. Another. Delete this after reading. Ruth held up a printed audit log. Times, IPs, device IDs. We set up two-factor on all admin accounts last month, she said gently. When you signed into the church account to message congregants, you approved the login with your phone. That record is not a judgment. It is a fact Aaron tried to stand, but the pastor, the man who'd trusted him with someone else's heartbreak, said, sit. The room was quiet, the kind that feels like a held breath. Ruth turned to the newlywed and apologized to her in front of everyone. Then she turned to me. We should have protected you better too. Aaron resigned on the spot and sent a blast text later about church politics. People wrote back with screenshots of his evangelism. He threatened to sue for defamation until the admin logs made any argument look like a child insisting the cookie jar jumped. Karma arrived in a choir robe, not fire and brimstone, just Ruth with a folder and a voice that didn't shake. The ministry kept meeting. The notebook kept filling. And I learned the holiest thing might be a boundary drawn with receipts. Story 14. Luca mocked my recipe cards like they were folk art. Real chefs don't measure, he'd say, flicking flour off my counter while he watched cooking shows and called contestants frauds. He filmed me making my grandmother's lemon cake for his followers and captioned it, "Cute girlfriend tries baking." I baked anyway. Love survived his commentary until it didn't. Months after I left, an email pinged. We'd love permission to use your image on Fire on a Plate. Episode featuring Chef Luca. He'd auditioned with my cake. I tuned in out of masochism and spite. He told the judges it was a Tuscan heirloom. My grandmother was from Trenton. They gave him 30 minutes to recreate it. He swaggered, eyeballing ingredients like a man about to lose a war he didn't know had started. Here's the thing he never learned because he never listened. Nonna swapped vanilla for a dash of almond, and she added a pinch of salt to the frosting because life needs edges. She also greased with olive oil and dusted with cornmeal so the crust sang. He pulled the cake early. The center trembled like doubt, and slathered on too sweet frosting. The judge cut a slice, chewed, and said, flat, like a postcard of a cake. Another judge sniffed. Butter, not oil. Why? He bluffed about French technique. They asked for his recipe card. He didn't have one. He never did. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed. My tiny bakery's waitlist had jumped. A producer had tagged my old video. Me in an apron, measuring on instinct. Origin? The comments filled with people asking for the recipe. I posted the card, stains and all. Use cornmeal, I wrote. Trust me, the show eliminated him with a montage of his best eye rolls. He posted a story about rigged television. My nonna would have cackled. Karma wasn't revenge. It was a measuring spoon. He'd spent a year telling me real chefs don't measure. The day he needed precision, he only had swagger. I still sift flour and think about that. How the smallest pinch decides whether something rises. Story 15. Ethan trained like training could fix a relationship. We signed up for the same marathon. Him talking splits, me talking Saturdays we could spend side by side. He started posting reels about discipline, quick cuts of sunrise runs and protein bowls, voiceovers about people who hold you back. A week before the race, he suggested we cool it publicly. Apparently, soft launches apply to exits too. Race day, he kissed my forehead at the start and took off like a commercial. At mile 12, I saw him already on mile 20's out and back. He smirked. I felt slow and foolish. But near mile 23, an official stepped into the lane and pointed him to the side. His bib beeped red on the handheld scanner. The race had rolled out timing mats on a new narrow bridge, a pilot anti-cutting program they bragged about on Instagram. Finishers needed pings from every mat, including the little hidden one zip-tied under the bridge's railing. Ethan's data skipped miles 14 to 19. A volunteer quietly measured his bib. The safety pins were bent like someone had yanked it off and on. He argued in well-lit fury. I took a bathroom break. The official, kind and relentless, said, "For 35 minutes without passing any mats?" Spectators watched like it was cable. I jogged past, not stopping, my chest tight from effort and something like relief. After the race, the organizers posted DQs with data visualizations, pretty graphs of pace lines. Ethan's line dropped into impossible, then spiked, like a lie trying to keep rhythm. Comments piled up. One was from a running store. "We'll be reallocating prize gear to the next legitimate finisher." Another was from his real collab partner. "Integrity is part of our brand." He texted me. "You reported me." I didn't. The bridge did. The hidden mat did. The volunteers who cared about fairness did. He deleted his training reels and posted a mental health break note that read like a resigned caption. I still run past that bridge. The mat's gone now. Pilot over. But sometimes I hear the phantom beep of a truth that doesn't need me to chase it. He taught me something without meaning to. You can't sprint through a life you're faking. The course keeps receipts, and so do the people who run it beside you. Story 16. He was the one who demanded the tests. If you've got nothing to hide, swab the baby. We did it at the kitchen table between half-eaten pancakes and a cartoon still paused on the TV. He'd been pacing for weeks, tossing out little grenades. Hard to trust when timelines are messy. Crazy how your cycle changed right when Carl got promoted. And then acting wounded when I bled from the shrapnel. So I ordered kits. Me, him, our son. I wanted peace more than pride. The paternity results hit first. 99.99%. He was the father. He stared at the screen like it had called him a slur. Then the testing site gave us the thing he didn't expect. A new match banner at the top of his profile. Close family son. The kid was 4. The mother's username was a floral pun I recognized from an office baby shower 2 departments over. She'd sat across from me balancing a paper plate on her knee while he worked late. He said it had to be a glitch, but the percentages were there like math wearing steel-toed boots. Shared DNA. 49.8%. The kid's public tree, people overshare, listed a birth month that mapped perfectly onto a conference he'd taken to Orlando. I felt something unclench in my spine I didn't know had been knotted. Every accusation he'd hurled at me boomeranged with a name. I didn't throw a scene. I printed things. Screenshots. That photo from the shower where I'm holding a diaper cake like it's ticking. And I called a lawyer. He raged about privacy and my data, which was funny from a man who had turned my uterus into a spreadsheet. HR got involved on their end because the mother was on his team. Apparently, fraternization policies don't like surprise 4-year-olds. Here's the piece that still glows for me. He forced that test to prove I was unfaithful, and the only person it convicted was him twice over, once for cheating, once for gaslighting. The next time I buckled our son into his car seat, he kicked his feet and asked if we could get pancakes again. We did. I poured syrup in a figure 8 and thought about how karma sometimes arrives with a sterile swab and a login. It doesn't fix everything, but it clears a sky. Story 17. My ex built a startup like it was a religion, and the doctrine was control. During our marriage, he'd sit up late redlining documents, whispering bad lever like a bedtime story. He wrote his own guillotine. Any founder terminated for cause including violations of the anti-fraternization policy he bragged about to keep things clean, would have their shares repurchased at $0.01. I used to make jokes about hubris. He said, "That's why I'm the CEO." We divorced when the company hit Series B. I took a small, clean slice in the settlement. Non-voting common. A proxy for board communications. He said it was cute. I wanted to understand. Fast forward a year. Anonymous complaint, internal investigation, Slack exports rendered like scripture. There he was, a married CEO, sending heart-eye emojis and calendar invites titled one-to-one, offsite, to a direct report. The head of people, a woman who'd learned the hard way not to be surprised, recommended termination for cause. He begged for context. The board scheduled a special meeting. Because of the settlement, I held as proxy for a portion of his common shares until a transfer finished. Legal confirmed. I could attend and vote exactly as written. I sat at the far end of a too-cold conference room and watched him try every inning of the playbook. Minimize, reframe, threaten to walk with customers. The GC slid the policy across the table and, with the gentleness of a guillotine operator, tapped the clause he had drafted himself. For cause shall include, without limitation, fraternization with any direct report. When they called the vote, the independent directors went first. Yes, yes, yes. Then the major investor. Yes, then me. My sliver of proxy humming like a tiny tuning fork. Yes, I said into the microphone. It didn't swing the math. It didn't need to. It was the weight of a word I didn't get to say when I was married to him. No to the story where he always wins. Afterward, he cornered me in the hallway and whispered that I'd embarrassed him. I reminded him the clause, the culture, the consequences were all his design. By month's end, the company had repurchased his founder block at a penny. He posted a Medium essay about founder exile that read like a man suing a mirror. I took my tiny quarterly dividend check to a cafe and paid cash for a pastry like a ritual. Karma didn't arrive with pitchforks. It wore a blazer and cited paragraph 12b. He forged the sword. Policy swung it. I just held a string he once tied around my neck and tugged it free. Story 18. I married into a family that never stopped switching languages mid-sentence. His mom preferred her first tongue when she was tired. He teased her for it. "We're in America, Ma," like geography can erase a throat. I started lessons on my phone on the bus, whispering syllables into a cracked speaker. He called my Duolingo streak cute and told our friends I was going through an immigrant cosplay phase, which is the kind of joke that explains a man better than he intended. When his mom's aneurysm ruptured, the world became fluorescent. In the ER, monitors beeped like impatient birds. A resident explained options in English fast enough to burn. His mom woke into agitation, clutching my sleeve, words spilling in the language he always edited out. I understood enough to catch fear and a wish. Do the thing that might save her, not the thing that lets her sleep into silence. My husband insisted she would never want heroics. He said I was misinterpreting. The attending paused and asked about a healthcare proxy. 5 months earlier, on a gray Tuesday, I'd filled out forms with her at the kitchen table while we ate oranges. She'd named me her proxy because I listened. I didn't know it would matter. Now the attending turned to me, not him. "What does she want?" he asked. I repeated her words back in her language, then in English, my voice shaking but not breaking. He bristled. The surgeon nodded. Consent forms slid across plastic. She made it through surgery. Rehab was slow. Language came back like a tide. Thin at first, then pulling shells to shore. She practiced with me, not him. He sulked that we'd conspired. He didn't like a world where I was needed in a way he wasn't. A month later, she called him into the living room and, in the language he reduced to a punchline, told him to move out. She'd overheard him mock my accent on speakerphone. She handed me an envelope, a notarized letter granting me joint authority on her finances for medical and household purposes. He sputtered about loyalty. She said, in the English he preferred when she wanted emphasis, "Loyalty is listening when I am small." We didn't last long after that. He left shouting that I'd stolen his mother. I still drive her to appointments. We speak both languages now, mixing them until the sentences feel like a hand with all its fingers. Karma wasn't a clapback. It was a consent form, and a sentence said in the tongue he refused to hear. Story 19. He called me his muse. It's charming until you learn he means library. I wrote him letters during our slow season. Lines that felt like stitches, a few pages turned into a small chapbook, that a micropress printed in a run of 200 with a crooked spine, and a Library of Congress control number that made me feel ridiculous and real. He shelved a copy in our living room and never cracked it. We broke up in winter. In spring, he announced a book deal. Debut poet. Big blurbs. cover art like a bruise. At his reading, the indie bookstore put out folding chairs and warm wine. He wore a scarf. People clapped at metaphors like they were fireworks. Then he read a poem, and I recognized the muscles of my own sentences under his skin. 2 lines lifted almost verbatim from a letter I wrote the night my dad went into the hospital. The way the IV hiss sounded like a snake forgiving me. My face went hot, then cold. I could have stayed quiet. Instead, during Q&A, I raised my hand like a student. "Can you speak to your influences?" I asked. "Particularly your use of second person in Night Watch and the phrase, 'the snake forgives'?" He smiled the smile of men who sell sincerity retail. "We're all remixing," he said. She was my muse. The bookseller, God bless the brave, had my chapbook under the counter. I don't know if they'd planned it or if the universe coordinated outfits that night. They placed it next to his book on the signing table, open to the page with the lines, date-stamped tiny press logo like a witness. The room shifted. A woman near the back whispered, "Oh." Someone filmed. The publisher's publicist, who had been scrolling, looked up with the face of a person smelling smoke. He tried to pivot into a conversation about intertextuality. The bookseller quietly said, "This has an LCCN. That number is not a weapon. It's a door that locks." The next week, the publisher issued a statement about textual overlap and rights review. His tour paused. The festival uninvited him. He texted me that I'd ruined him, which is interesting math given who borrowed whose words. I still have one of the first 200 in a shoebox. The spine is crooked. I run my finger over it when I need to remind myself I'm not just a vessel for someone else's genius. Karma didn't roar. It footnoted. It put my original on the table next to his copy and let anyone who could read line up their eyes. Story 20. He called me bus girl, like it was a slur. We lived in a city with trains that sing and bus lanes brighter than billboards. But he treated public transit like a character flaw. He'd honk at cyclists, then lecture me about grit. When he drank, he drove, and when I argued, he said I was addicted to rules. I left after a near miss on a wet night, the kind where every headlight looks like a decision you can't take back. 2 months later, my route detoured for construction, and the bus pulled up to a stop I never used. On the shelter glass was a PSA. The city rolled out after a cluster of drunk driving crashes. Split screens of faces and headlines. Court dockets you could scan with a QR code. A line that read, "This didn't have to happen." I stared at panel 3 for a long time. It was him. Not a mugshot. Our city doesn't use those. But the booking photo the paper had run. Eyes red, jaw clenched in the way I knew meant rage, not remorse. Underneath, his initials, his blood alcohol content, his sentence, license suspended, ignition interlock, community service at a victim impact panel. I scanned the code with a shaking thumb. Up came the docket. Public record. The crash date matched the night he'd texted me a selfie from a bar with a caption, "Ubering, don't worry." He had hit a parked car. No one got hurt. He called it bad luck. The court called it the first time he'd been caught. 3 stops later, the driver announced the route number like a benediction. An older woman saw me staring and said, "You okay, honey?" I laughed then, a small cracked thing. "I am, actually." I stayed on until the terminus, then rode back, past the same shelter, just to make sure it was real and not a screenplay my brain wrote out of spite. He texted later, "You see that ad? You told them?" As if the city in sunlight and the clerk who posts dockets take requests from ex-girlfriends. I didn't reply. The bus hissed, the doors opened, people got on and off, all of us carried by a thing he thought was beneath him. Karma wasn't a billboard shaming him. It was me, moving through a life he said was small, watching the thing he swore he could outrun keep pace, steady as a route map. Story 21. I built the prototype he bragged about, the way some people build ships in bottles. Late, careful, quiet. We were dating, sharing a fridge and a future. He was my team lead and my boyfriend, which I thought meant we were a we. He thought it meant he was a we. When the conference call for submissions went out, reproducibility challenge, submit your model plus pipeline for verification, he put his name first, mine second, and told me not to be precious about order. At the conference, he preened in the green room and practiced jokes he thought sounded humble. The talk went fine. Then the verification committee announced a new rule. To receive the prize money, teams had to hand over raw repo history, commits, authors, timestamps, so the community could rerun every step. He smirked and said, "Transparency, baby," and squeezed my knee like we were about to cash a check together. They projected our Git log onto a 20-foot screen. My handle, my timestamps, my commit messages, pages of them, tiny oars rowing us forward, stacked like a city skyline. His commits were a handful of merge and readme tweaks. Worse for him, the one core refactor he'd claimed in the deck was literally a revert of his own experiment back to my original code, with his comment in plain English. Nuked my changes, Hers works. The room chuckled. Not mean, just honest. The committee chair cleared his throat and said, "Per the rules, first author credit will reflect primary authorship as evidenced in the logs." He called my name to the stage. I felt my stomach float to my throat. He grabbed the back of my chair like a man standing on a ship as it tips. On stage, I didn't give the speech I'd rehearsed. I said the thing I used to say to him at 1 a.m. when the model finally converged. Thank you to all the ghosts in the machine. Colleagues, papers, comments from strangers. Afterward, he hissed that I'd humiliated him. I didn't. The log did. The prize check had my name on it. And later, when a recruiter asked who really led the work, I sent the repo link instead of a story. We broke up a week later. He told people I was ungrateful. I told no one. Karma wasn't the prize. It was a 20-foot wall of receipts written in commit hashes in time. It turns out you can't pitch a narrative against a transcript and win.